What if the strongest person in the room is actually the weakest, the most fragile? In this presentation that we're going to have today, we're going to talk about that a little bit. We're going to continue to explore the hidden psychological engine that drives narcissistic behavior. Beneath the appearance of confidence, there's not such a confident person there. There's maybe a feeling, a sense, a belief that they have authority, and perhaps they do. Maybe there's a belief that they have dominance. Perhaps they do. But it often lies from a vulnerable root, a unbearable fear of shame and exposure. Hi, I'm Dr. Pierre Simon, and I'm so happy you joined with us today as we continue our topic, Unmasking Narcissism. This is part 2 of what we had started last time, and we're talking about the narcissistic control. That's more than just merely arrogance or desire to dominate. At a deeper level, it's a defensive system designed to protect let's say a very fragile inner core, a very fragile identity. We all have identities, and we build our identities as we grow in life. From childhood on, we're forming and building and strengthening that who we are, identity, and hopefully it's a good one. However, when there's damage done early on, in most cases it's damage. Some cases it may be inherited, but it's maybe 2-3% inherited. The rest it's created somehow. It's caused on the child, the victim, you might say. Not so much always intentionally, but perhaps due to narcissistic parents or circumstances beyond the control of the family. And that defensive schema that occurs to self-protect brings about an identity that's fragmented, disturbed, just not right. Something's amiss in trying to make up for something that is felt to be lacking or empty. Power becomes a shield. Control becomes emotional regulation, and domination becomes a desperate attempt to prevent psychological collapse. In this session, we're going to examine the illusion of strength that narcissistic personalities construct, why power functions as a defense against shame, and how control, gaslighting, and rage operate as mechanisms of self-protection for that narcissist, for those individuals. We use terms so much, and sometimes things get lost when we use terms or names like narcissist, and it just becomes a name out there that gets thrown around. We don't see what's behind it because we're just looking at the name. Look through the behavior, look through the person. What's in the heart? What's on the inside? You'll relate better to them rather than just saying, well, they're a narcissist, or they're this, or they're that. How can you help them? Or how can you relate to them in a constructive way? Because you can get things done even with individuals that have issues of narcissism. It's just being able to find that point of communicating with them that they can receive, that they can comprehend. And then they're able to perhaps give back, although they don't like giving back, but they'll give back because they're getting something from you in return that's meeting that need in them. And now you're communicating. And that's what we want, to resolve problems or to improve things, to find better ways of doing something or fixing a problem. We have to work with different personalities. And to do that, we've got to not look at them by a title, but what's inside? How can I reach that person inside to get this need accomplished? And now you're conversing and things get done that way. And that's what we want to be. We want to be that communicator in a constructive way. And that goes along with not just work or businesses, but that's family as well. You want to be able to communicate to that difficult family member when you're having a birthday or it's a holiday or something else is going on that you want to have a good time, or you want satisfaction for everyone in that activity. And that one person, if you're not communicating well to that one person, they can bring everybody down. They take the air out of the room, and maybe they got to be the center of attention because they feel they're not getting that attention, because perhaps they're not for a particular reason, or perhaps it's going somewhere else, and then they panic, they fear. We're going to be discussing that as we go along in this topic today. Finally, we're going to consider the clinical and biblical pathways towards healing, where the illusion of domination gives way to secure identity, humility, and truth. Because the reality is this: control may silence shame for a moment, but only truth, humility, and secure identity can heal it. We want to heal things. We don't want to just put a Band-Aid over things. I hope you'll stay with us throughout this presentation, and please take a moment now to like and subscribe us for future presentations. Allow me to begin, as we did last time, with sharing some brief information, a brief introduction on my first book, Unmasking Addiction. Unmasking Narcissism, that we've been discussing, is my second book, and it's pretty much done. I'm just waiting to find a publisher that I can afford. But this first book, Unmasking Addiction, stems from years of instructing as an addictions instructor to clients, students working on their certified addictions professional certifications, and the years of clients with addictive problems. And so I was able to draw from all that information and put it into the first book, Unmasking Addiction. This work advances a truly holistic model of recovery. So when I say holistic, we think New Age stuff when we use the word holistic. It's not New Age stuff. Holistic means that it's gathering everything, not just academic, but spiritual as well, and environmental and biological, and all these things come together. And if we address all these things, which is in the Bible, spirit, soul, and body, we're addressing all three of those areas. That's holistic. When we're doing that, there's a better chance of healing or recovery or perhaps maturity, improvement, when we're addressing those three parts of us. But if we only address one, let's say we only address the body, we only address, or we only address the mind but not the body, or we only address the body and the mind but not the spirit, something's lacking. There may be some improvement, but will there be complete improvement? Will there be total healing? Will there be growth as much as we would like? Address all three areas, and that's holistic, and that's why we use that term. It may have been stolen by New Agers or whatever, but think of it as spirit, soul, and body, addressing every part of you. And when that's done, for example, AA found that they roughly had 80% success rate when those three areas were addressed. And this was early on when AA first started, and they were using the Bible, and they were addressing those three areas. There was a much higher success rate than there is today when they took the Bible out and they brought in other things. And that's not to say anything poor about it, because it still works, but it's only 15-20% success rate, according to their own research, compared to how it used to be when all three areas were addressed. That's what we want to do, address all three areas in every function in our life. So this work advances a truly holistic model of recovery, one that refuses to reduce addiction to a single dimension. Rather than addressing only behavior or symptom management, Unmasking Addiction presents a comprehensive pathway toward lasting freedom by engaging the whole person, mind, body, and spirit. The heart of the book is grounded in conviction that sustainable recovery requires integration. Emotional wounds must be understood and healed. Cognitive distortions, well, that's thinking wrong. Let's put it that way. Cognitive distortions must be identified and corrected. The body must be restored and strengthened. And the spirit must be renewed and anchored to something. What are you going to anchor it to? Well, let's anchor that to truth. Because if we anchor to truth, that's reality. If we anchor to lies, there's no reality there. It's like a puff of smoke. It dissipates, disappears. There's nothing to hang on to. There's no standard there to hold you up. Truth, however, there's a standard. It's reality-based. It's going to hold you up. It's always going to be there, unlike that little puff of smoke that dissipates and it's gone later. Addiction is never merely a chemical dependency. It's often intertwined with trauma, shame, false beliefs, relational fractures, and spiritual discontention or disconnection. Therefore, recovery must be equality. It must be equally comprehensive. Unmasking Addiction guides readers through a balanced, restorative process that integrates spiritual formation, emotional healing, and physical well-being. It equips individuals with practical strategies, clinical insight, and biblically grounded wisdom designed to support long-term sobriety. Not simply abstinence, but transformation. That's change. That's like the caterpillar turning into the beautiful butterfly. That's a transformation. Something better has come out of what once was. And we want to change. We want to transform into something better than what we were. I want to be better today than I was yesterday. I want to be better today than I was as a child. I'm sure all of you feel the same way. The goal is not only to remove the addictive behavior, but to rebuild identity, restore dignity, and cultivate resilience. To learn more about the book, you can go to my webpage on the book, unmaskingaddiction.org, or you can purchase the book through Amazon or Westbow Press, the publisher. Well, let's review a little bit about last time when we were talking about the three pillars of narcissistic control. We had brought up the fact that narcissistic power has to be understood in layers. Psychological foundation is that first layer, and that's mental and emotional fragility. They're fragile on the inside. They're so fragile that it's like that puff of smoke, you might say. There's very little there. And there's that fear that it's going to be gone, that it's going to hurt. Whatever comes their way is going to hurt. It's going to be painful. So that brings about the emotional driver that we discussed. And that's the inner shame that's within the narcissist. And then the behavioral expression is how they compensate for that using control patterns. And those are the three pillars, you might say. The fragile core beneath the grandiose surface is something that you don't see. You see the opposite of it. When you see the opposite, then think of the opposite must be true on the inside of that person. And if it is, that's who you're really communicating to. You're not really communicating to how they're expressing themselves. You have to go through that or behind it, behind the mask, as we're often talking about, the persona. Behind that mask, talk to the child inside, talk to that person inside who is so fearful and fragile and defensive. There's a hunger for dominance when they get defensive. And what happens there is what they call annihilation anxiety. When criticism feels like death, control becomes their oxygen. Annihilation anxiety is the fear that the self will collapse under exposure. It's an unconscious or subconscious fear of ceasing to exist. And that brings us to today's discussion in Unmasking the Power and Control System of Narcissism. The narcissist's illusion of strength, power as a defense against shame, and mechanics of narcissistic control. What's the mechanics of it? Narcissistic power systems are psychological defenses. Control functions are protection against that shame being exposed or being felt. Domination replaces vulnerability and trust. These are obvious when you see what's on the outside, not so obvious with what it's coming from the roots of the inside. The opposite is being seen on the outside. There are those that dominate overtly, like bullies, for example, and those that dominate passive-aggressively. So there's narcissists who are like bullies, who are aggressive and rageful and all that. But there are narcissists, as we've discussed in the past, that are passive-aggressive in the sense that they use humiliation, name-calling, finger-pointing, blaming, manipulation to express the mechanics of their control. Because for them, it's safer for one reason or another, instead of being aggressive or the bully. This presentation explores the hidden mechanics behind narcissistic power and control. What appears externally as arrogance, entitlement, or even dominance often originates from a deeply fragile psychological structure, that fragility on the inside. Narcissistic individuals construct systems of control not merely to manipulate others, but to protect themselves from intolerable shame and internal collapse. And yet that's hard to see, isn't it? When you see a bully, for example, I can remember bullies when I was in school, when I was in elementary and junior high. I guess in high school we didn't see too many anymore. But yeah, they were there. And even once in a while, you might have become a little bully to somebody. And then you regret it later, but you felt threatened in some way, or you felt like you needed to get along with the bully, so you ended up acting like them. But because it wasn't you, it didn't feel right, it didn't feel comfortable, you didn't like it, you felt guilty, and you just didn't do it anymore. Well, that happens. But it also teaches us to grow, to not be like the bully, to not be like the manipulator and those others, because that's not who you are. That is who they are. And so it's more natural for them, and they keep doing it. The central role of shame, it's important to understand that shame threatens identity rather than behavior. Narcissistic individuals experience shame as psychic devastation. The false self forms a silence through the shame. Shame differs from guilt in that if you feel guilt, what do you feel? What are you thinking? I know what I think, because I have a supine temperament which tends to feel guilt very easily. Even if I don't do anything wrong, I feel guilty. So then I have to, make up for it, even though I didn't do anything wrong. So I try harder. I work harder. I give more, and so on. Because if I don't, I just naturally feel a little guilt. Maybe I need to work a little harder. Maybe I need to do a little bit more. Well, that's a good driver in a sense, but then I have to set boundaries to it, because I can burn out. I can wear myself out quickly if I don't set boundaries, realistic boundaries. And that's what we do in healthy ways to manage ourselves and manage our behaviors, our thoughts, and so on. The narcissist has no management in that sense. It's all reactionary. It's all throwing up a barrage to protect what's inside. So shame differs from guilt in a profound way that guilt says, I did something wrong. Shame says, something is wrong with me. The narcissist, shame is not just simply uncomfortable. It threatens their entire sense of self. Their very existence becomes threatened. Because this experience is so intolerable, the psyche, the inner self, the mind, the persona, constructs a powerful defense system designed to avoid exposure at all cost. The narcissistic personality doesn't simply want admiration, it requires it to maintain that psychological stability. I have to have it. It's not, I need it. I have to have it. You have to understand, I have to have it. What's wrong with you that you don't understand, I need this, or I should have that, or, and that goes on, doesn't it? That scared me a little bit. Reaction formation occurs from that. The reaction formation, when we use the term for reaction formation, basically it's transforming vulnerability into superiority. Shame is replaced with grandiosity. So it's sort of the opposite in a sense. Dependency is replaced with entitlement, and vulnerability is hidden behind dominance. One of the core psychological defenses involved is what I had said earlier, reaction formation. The individual transforms painful vulnerability into exaggerated superiority. Instead of admitting weakness, they proclaim invulnerability. This transformation often produces statements like, I'm superior. I deserve special treatment. I'm above accountability. I think we hear a lot of that in the politics today, don't we? These declarations are not genuine confidence, they're psychological armor against shame. Then comes the threatened egotism and aggression. Why shame often produces rage. Narcissistic aggression follows ego threat. Rage restores perceived dominance. That is, if I'm a narcissist and I'm feeling weak, I'm feeling vulnerable, there's a quick reaction to fix it. And we're going to get into a little bit more about that next time, but there's a quick reaction to fix it. And what's the quick reaction? Well, it's what worked before. Well, what worked before? Well, getting angry. It shuts people off. It backs them off. It shuts them down. It puts me on top when I get angry. Well, then rage becomes a quick reaction. It becomes a way of handling that perceived threat. So rage restores perceived dominance. Control temporarily stabilizes identity. The research proves it out. The research demonstrated that aggression frequently emerges when inflated self-image is threatened. Narcissistic rage isn't random, it's defensive. When a client rages with me in the office, immediately my first thought is there's defensiveness there. We triggered something, we touched something. Now we need to identify what it is because we're getting somewhere now. So it's not a terrible thing if somebody's raging in the office. It's actually a good thing. I kind of chuckle on the inside saying, oh, we hit a mark here. Let's find out what it is so we can fix it. And we do most of the time. And when we do, later on, they see it, they recognize it, and they thank you for it. And they're able to grow from that point on. When admiration disappears and criticism appears, the narcissistic psyche feels exposed. Rage then becomes an attempt to silence shame and reassert control. Again, keep in mind, it's not that they think there's shame, they don't realize it, but it's on the inside. And it's not that they feel you're shaming them. They're not even thinking of that word shame. But that's what's on the inside. And we can see it when we know that the anger or the rage or the dominance or the aggression or whatever it might be to take control is on the outside. It's hiding what's on the inside. And what's on the inside is the opposite of it. Control becomes emotional anesthesia, yet it never resolves the underlying wound. Which brings us to an illusion. What does that do? It gives an illusion of strength. It makes them feel like they're surviving. Control substitutes the emotional regulation for them. Domination protects against abandonment fears. Power creates an illusion of stability. To understand the narcissistic control, it helps to first recognize that domination is not simply a personality trait. For many individuals, it feels like a matter of survival. Inside of narcissistic psyche, narcissistic mask, that is the persona covering them, often exists unresolved humiliation, unmet attachment hunger, and a fragmented identity. Power becomes the mechanism through which these vulnerabilities are regulated. When there's an overreaction occurring, even in people who are not identified as narcissists, everybody overreacts at times. What do you do when you overreact? I know what I do when I overreact. I think, wait a minute, what did I just do? I honked my horn at somebody pulled in front of me. Well, sometimes I pull in front of people. Why am I honking my horn? Well, I'm in a hurry. Well, that wasn't right. I stop at stop signs. Again, talking about my guilt. If I feel guilty if I break the law, not stopping at stop signs is breaking the law. I have to stop at a stop sign, and my boys, tease me about it because they may ease through, and I might say something, but that's guilt if I don't stop at the stop sign. Yet, why did I honk my horn? Well, all right, I must be feeling vulnerable. I must be feeling insecure. I'm feeling like maybe I'm not in control today or at this moment, or maybe I'm running a little late and I'm not on time. Maybe I'm just feeling taken advantage of. Okay. There we go. I don't like that. Feeling taken advantage of. And you can go further with that. Where'd that come from? What's the origin of that? Is it the temperament? Sometimes you're just born with a temperament that could be like that, or is it something else? Maybe you were taken advantage of as a child. Maybe you weren't given that attention that you should have been given as a child, or maybe it was something else. Maybe problems at home when you left the home. But you're identifying why you honked the horn. You're identifying what the problem is that caused that trigger. Okay, now I can address it better. And if I can fix it today, I'm going to fix it today so I don't do it again tomorrow. Domination is therefore experienced as psychological safety, even though it ultimately creates instability. So there's mechanics involved in narcissistic control. Mechanics are the patterns of behavior. Control reduces perceived vulnerability. Dominance replaces trust. Psychological patterns follow predictable structures. Narcissistic control doesn't appear randomly. It develops as a consistent system designed to regulate fear and maintain identity. What appears externally as manipulation or arrogance often reflects an internal attempt to prevent emotional collapse, ceasing to exist. Recognizing these mechanisms helps counselors and pastors respond with wisdom rather than confusion. And yet there's that control, that coercive dominance, which is part of the mechanisms. When control becomes oppression, that's not a good thing. Micromanagement and intimidation restrict autonomy, less independence, less freedom, less liberty. Financial and emotional control creates dependency, less vulnerability. And domination substitutes or gives the illusion of a substitute. Even coercive control describes patterns which individuals restrict another person's freedom through manipulation, intimidation, and resource control. While not all narcissistic individuals engage in overt abuse, the underlying psychological structure often overlaps with coercive systems. When I say overt abuse, the obvious. There's not so obvious, and then there's the obvious. When another person becomes smaller or dependent, the narcissistic individual feels safer. And so we see that a lot in marriages, where an individual may isolate the partner from their friends, their family, their familiar things. They move out into the country, or they move across the state or to the other side of the country, or any number of things, because the smaller the other person becomes in their flexibility, their control of their life, the more powerful the narcissist becomes over them, the safer the narcissist feels. So that brings us to gaslighting. And we spoke in detail about gaslighting before, that controlling of reality. Conversations are rewritten or denied in gaslighting. Victims are accused of overreacting. Perception becomes destabilized. Gaslighting involves manipulating another person's perception of reality. Statements are denied, memories are rewritten, and responsibility is shifted. It's been observed that projection and externalization allow narcissistic individuals to avoid confronting their own inadequacy. If reality can be rewritten, the narcissistic self remains untarnished. Quick and easy way of feeling better about themselves to make you feel bad about yourself, to make you feel confused, to make you, over time, start to believe that your mind is mush, that you can't make a good decision, you can't do things independently. You become more dependent, relying upon the narcissist for control over you, over your life. And then that brings us to the rage part. That terrible part. That emergency defense system of the narcissist. Rage follows injury to the grandiose self. Emotional intensity replaces inner emptiness. Dominance restores temporary cohesion. It's been described that narcissistic rage as an explosive reaction to injury of that inner self. Injury to the grandiose self, you're taking away my power, my dominance, you're destabilizing it, which is injuring my inner self to be exposed, to be seen, or to be felt. And the quick, easy way, as I said before, is let's get angry, let's be dominant, let's rage. And off they go It's like a volcano erupting. Watch out when it occurs. That's not the time to have a discussion with them. That's the time to let them rage. All right. If they're going to get tired, let them go. Sometimes I'll let someone go for 20, 30 minutes in the office and they're just venting away and all that. But you know what? You can tell, all right, they're getting tired now. They've said it. It's all come out. They're feeling like they protected themselves with this hedge of protection of anger and whatever else they had to say there. Now you can speak with them. Now you can have a talk. Slowly, carefully, gently, but you're better able to have that talk at that moment than you are in the midst of their rage and anger. Because what are you going to do? You're just going to intensify it. The more adrenaline is going to get pumped into their system. What happens then? Psychosis. At that point, they're going to lose touch with reality if they get too angry. That's when they do crazy things, and that's when it's really dangerous. And you don't want them to elevate to that point. And you often see that when, the police are arresting somebody that's in that state of rage and so on, whether it's drug-induced or not. The adrenaline is kicking in, and they're going to do crazy things. And later they'll say they didn't do anything. They don't even remember it because they were in that out of reality state of psychosis. Rage provides structure when the inner world feels like it's disintegrating. Well, what are the developmental roots? Where does those control defenses, where do they begin? Conditional love teaches performance-based worth. Emotional neglect disrupts secure attachment. That false self develops as protection, as I spoke of earlier. Usually it starts in childhood. It starts in those early ages. Even in infancy, it can begin if that infant isn't getting nurtured, isn't being taken care of when they're crying, and maybe they're soiled, maybe there's something else going on, or maybe they're just feeling alone because no one is in the room, and they're screaming and hollering and no one's coming in the room. And what does that do? It generates an unconscious inner sense of aloneness, of fear. I'm going to die. I'm going to cease to exist here. Where's mom? Where's dad? Nobody's coming to pick me up. That keeps happening. You've just built an identity within that shell of a child, of an infant, that young of an age. And it grows if it's reinforced, if it's fed over those few early years, first 3 years. It can be fed because the neglect or the non-nurturing environment that the child may be in, or the fearful environment. There may be nurture, but there's a lot of screaming and hollering, a lot of throwing things, or, well, okay, you can pick me up, but I'm still afraid. This stuff's going on around me. I need self-protection. Well, I'm going to cry louder. That's how I'm going to feel better. I'm going to have a fitful rage. I'm going to have a temper tantrum. I'm going to this or I'm that. Well, now they're building that outside protection, aren't they, at an early age? Many narcissistic defenses originate in those early relationships, in those early environments where vulnerability is felt to be unsafe. Children may learn that approval depends on performance, superiority, or even emotional suppression. Be quiet. Don't talk, don't say anything. I often get clients who, in their childhood, one of the parents was unsafe, screamed, hollered, critical, whatever. They knew, don't say anything when they're in the room. Just stay quiet, keep doing whatever you're doing, or leave the room as quick as you can. Here they're coming in, time to go. Here they've just come home, time to go into the room, your bedrooms. When that occurs, they're protecting their self-protection, but in that behavior or that reaction It causes them to build an identity, a mechanism of behavior for that self-protection that carries into adult life. So there's a spiritual architecture of power as well. With Adam and Eve, we can see how early it started. Narcissistic power mirrors Eden's temptation. Autonomy or independence, liberty, freedom, replaces dependence on God. Control substitutes for trust. The narcissistic quest for power echoes the ancient temptation in Genesis 3:5, or the desire to define reality apart from God. The serpent's promise was not about fruit. It was about authority and autonomy. The narcissistic psyche, persona or mask, attempts the same strategy, securing safety through control rather than communion. There's a biblical portrait that we see of narcissistic power. A lot of examples in the Bible, but let's just look at Saul and Absalom. Saul illustrates insecurity in leadership, King Saul, insecurity in leadership. Absalom demonstrates image manipulation. Pride ultimately leads to collapse. The Bible provides profound portraits of narcissistic leadership. Saul's insecurity transformed authority into paranoia when King David gained admiration before he was king. Absalom rose to power through charm and image manipulation, yet his leadership lacked integrity. Both narratives demonstrate that power used to preserve the ego ultimately collapses. It's that puff of smoke that just dissipates and it's gone. There's a cost to control. Isolation, rigidity, and spiritual hardening will occur. Control prevents genuine intimacy. Emotional rigidity intensifies over time. Never stays the same. It gets worse. If you're getting better, you're going to get better. You're going to keep getting better. If you're worse, if you're bad, if you're doing wrong, well, the wrong is going to intensify. It's going to increase. It becomes more automatic. It's not going to get better. And suddenly there has to be a crashing, a breakdown, a brokenness, a bottoming. And when you hit the final bottom, okay, I don't want this anymore. I've had enough. I don't want to live like this anymore. God, help me. I made a mess of my life. I'm giving it over to you. I'm surrendering my ego. I'm surrendering that mask. I'm surrendering whatever I need to surrender. Take over, Lord. And now when I've done that, I've surrendered that self, that persona, that mask. Now I've got to rebuild. And that's where recovery comes in with addictions. That's where regeneration occurs spiritually in all of us when we are rebuilding ourselves, strengthening perhaps a weak identity, or rebuilding a new identity. Control may appear stabilizing, but it carries devastating long-term consequences. Research shows that narcissistic traits correlate with unstable relationships and diminished empathy. Spiritually, pride prevents repentance. Control becomes a prison rather than protection. So there are clinical pathways to healing. Develop those tolerance for shame thoughts that will help you. In other words, dispute those shaming thoughts that you might have, those I'm worthless thoughts, or those thoughts I'm not good enough. Dispute them. Well, the easy way is look up some scripture verses that'll dispute it. Write it down so you can read it constantly. And before you know it, it becomes more automatic. Challenge those distorted beliefs. Build a secure identity. Healing requires gradually dismantling illusion of the false self. Clients must learn. When I say clients, it's anybody out there. They need to learn to experience shame without disintegrating those challenges, disintegrating survival beliefs rooted in superiority, and develop a secure identity that's not dependent on power. Counseling relationships provide a corrective experience where vulnerability doesn't lead to rejection. The gospel helps us to see the reversal of all this. Christ redefined power through service. True strength includes humility and surrender. Secure identity removes the need for domination. Jesus radically redefined power. In Mark chapter 10, verses 42 to 45, we see an example of that. Leadership in God's kingdom is not domination, but service. Philippians chapter 2 describes Christ who possessed ultimate authority yet relinquished status. The narcissistic system seeks survival through control. The gospel offers security through surrender. When identity is rooted in grace, domination is no longer necessary. Well, I hope you got something out of this today. Next time, we're going to be talking about unmasking narcissism as an addictive behavior. Have you ever wondered if narcissism could be more than just a personality disorder? Well, it could be, and we're going to talk about that next time. I hope you'll join us. Please give us a like and subscribe if you got something out of this today. And may your troubles be minor, blessings more, and happiness come through your door. We'll see you next time. God bless you.